State of the City address that we are doing as a communication device that the council had requested a couple years ago as another way to help people be informed about what's happening in our city. And tonight's focus, I'd like to focus on things that a lot of people aren't just as much aware of, because they're things that are kind of on scene that happen in the city. And it's the city, I think our activities are a lot like an iceberg, where you see about 10% of the activity that we all see, and about 90% of it are things that happen undercurrent that people aren't that aware of, yet it takes a lot of city time and resources and efforts. And with that being said, I want to, as I start, personally thank our city staff, because we have such what I think is a dedicated and knowledgeable staff that do the work. I mean, the council sets policy direction, and we have our ideas, and then the city staff has to kind of work on those to develop and refine them, assess the positives and the negatives with them. So I really want to thank the city staff for all their work on behalf of the city. And that came to light recently. We held this year our first annual Citizens Academy, and we had 12 residents from the city attend this academy for 9 weeks, where they had a chance to learn what each of the departments do and really dig into that. And most of the presentations were done at the Citizens Academy by our staff. And when I was sitting through some of those sessions, you'd see their knowledge and how much they desire to have people understand, and the efforts that they put forth every day. And just to think about things like last night's storm. I don't think we had a power outage, though I should be cautious. I'm not positive. We did not. And things like drinking water. Every time we're thirsty, we turn on that water, and it better be safe, because that's our responsibility. Yet it takes a lot of time and effort to do those types of things. And I also wanted to mention one other thing that our staff was very involved with helping the council on this year that I think was a really well done for serving our community, and that was our Community Service Awards that we presented this year. We presented 4 awards, one a Legacy Award, one for an adult, and one for a youth Community Service Award, and then also a Good Neighbor Award. And we hope to continue that program on into the future for many years to come, because we do know that our city has a lot of people that give a lot to it, and we do want those people to be occasionally recognized from time to time. So with that, I'd like to focus this evening to give the residents information on what we've accomplished over the last year, and to mention some of the challenges ahead, but particularly to focus on those things that we may not as residents be as aware of because we just don't see those things happening. First, I want to just mention very briefly a laundry list of some of what I considered more significant accomplishments from last year. And I think again, these are things that a lot of our residents have noticed and have seen, but just to kind of go back and reflect on this past year, we dedicated and have had a couple different ceremonies already at our new Veterans Park that has proven to be, I think, a huge asset to the community and a very good point of honor to our veterans. We did a mill and overlay on 11th Avenue down by Target, and I think we're all pleased that got finally taken care of. We did another student-built house this year, which was sponsored and funded by our city's HRA, which is down on 14th Avenue at 2341 14th Avenue. Please drive by and take a look when you have a chance. We had the opening last year of the Polar Ridge Senior Building, which is also not only senior housing, but also assisted living and memory care. We are under the process of building the new park shelter at Casey Lake, which is now under construction. We put in new playground equipment at Tower Park, and soon to be putting playground equipment up at Northwood. We have updated a fast-pitch softball field down at McKnight Field, and that was in association with the Minnesota Twins and their community fund, which we're much appreciative of. We also experimented with our Safer Streets program for pedestrians and bicyclists, which you'll see a living example of right out in front of City Hall in Margaret. And in September, we'll be doing an experiment with a demonstration down on First Avenue between 11th and 15th, between Richardson Elementary School and the high school, to get an assessment of what types of safety, whether this is a good alternative, or how we can make at least safer for people to get around town with non-motorized types of travel. We also have done some technology grades. I think most of us are aware of with our electric and our water meters. The water should all be done. The electric is probably at 50% or better, where you no longer have to have the meter readers come. It's all done with electronics and computer reads. And then last but certainly not least, I wanted to just mention a few new businesses that entered our city during the past year. One is Love Chocolates, which is for those old timers in the Harry's Rexall building next to Sandburg Mortuary. And by the way, they'll be having a ribbon cutting next Wednesday, the 17th of August at 4 p.m. So please stop by and participate. Some good samples will be had. And also I wanted to welcome the Journey of Misfit Dog Training School, which is off of behind the K&J Catering in a building located back off of the Park City's parking lot back there. And then also this fall, right across from City Hall, we'll be having the opening of a new school, the North Metro Flex Academy. So there's a lot of things that have been going on in the city. But now I'd like to turn to those 90% types of things of our city efforts that most residents don't know about, just because it's really out of sight. And the first thing is infrastructure. We have now put together a street replacement program for streets that are deteriorating, and we rate streets, so we find out the condition by doing samples of the street, layers of the streets, and we also look at the conditions just visually. And we are in now the second year of a street rebuilding program. It will be every other year. We did the first batch in 14. This year it'll be done in the same area, which is north of 17th Avenue and between Helen Street, including Helen and the Delaware 19th Avenue, that area. But I wanted to point out to people, you see the street, you see that going on, that project. Well, people pay assessments when you have streets redone. A lot of people think the assessments cover the cost. In most of our street projects, the assessments cover about 12 to 15% of the actual cost of the project, because we're an older city. When we replace streets, we have to rebuild everything. We have to replace not just the streets and curbs, but we have to redo the storm sewers, we have to redo the sanitary sewers, and we have to redo the water lines. And it's just part of doing business in an older community. Some of those costs are paid for by our water and sewer fees that we pay in our utility bill. We sell bonds and use some of that money to pay back the bonds. And we also utilize some of the money from the property tax, where we do a debt levy on the amount of bonds that we have to sell to pay the difference of the cost of those projects. So there's a lot of work going on there. There's also underground wiring that goes on with our city electric department. We're trying to get more of the main lines underground. So there's a lot of things that you don't really see when you see the street projects going on, and that's why they seem to take forever, because there's a lot of digging that goes on out there. The second thing I wanted to mention is the stormwater runoff issue. And I don't think we had too much flooding last night, probably on McKnight, though I wasn't out and about. But we do have pockets in our town that have still minor flooding areas, and some major when we have heavy storms, particularly in the area of 1st and 7th down by the VFW. We have some neighborhoods up on 1st and 2nd Avenues. We have a big area behind Reflex Medical that gets flooded. Some of the areas west of Christ Lutheran Church is another example of that. So we've been working this last year with our engineering firm to put a plan together to try to alleviate that. And it's a lot like playing dominoes, because you can't just start doing the project somewhere. You have to figure out, we'll have to do it in phases as we can afford it, and you have to figure out what are the first steps you need to do and move along down the line until you get the whole project completed. So that's another area that we are spending a lot of time and effort on that people haven't heard much about. I think another area is our park and park needs and our planning for future parks. As I mentioned, we have the new park facility, which is kind of a real showpiece that will be going up in the city, a really significant park structure that I think will be a pride in our community for years to come. But we still have other needs with playground equipment replacements, with other buildings. We have the building up at Housie Park. We have the building at Northwood that are both in conditions that aren't too far away from needing to be replaced. So this year as well, the Park Commission is working on doing a capital facility plan to look at all the park needs. We also have to be concerned about older playground equipment and when that wears out, to make sure they continue to be safe for our children to use. So there's another area. One of the things that amazes me is this year the city's rebuilding 3 sewer lift stations. We have 4 in the city, and the 3 that are being rebuilt are at a cost of almost $900,000. Yet we won't see much of it. There might be some trucks around there. That project should start very soon. The one you'll probably notice the most is on 11th Avenue, right across from Target. But again, very expensive, very necessary to make sure that we can keep our sewage flowing out of the town. That's pretty important, I think, as we move forward. But it's something that costs a lot of money, but you sometimes don't even realize it. And then the last thing I wanted to mention as far as infrastructure is our drinking water system integrity. I mean, as I mentioned before, you turn on the tap, you expect the water to be safe and healthy. Well, that really means a lot of testing. I think we test our water 2 or 3 days a week. We also have to maintain our 2 water towers in town. When one needs to be repainted, as an example, I think the last time we did it, it was about $275,000 to repaint one of the water towers. So those are all, I think, issues that are very important that we just have in our infrastructure system in the town, but we don't realize all the efforts and time to go into that. And last, I certainly don't want to miss out on mentioning our electrical. Again, it's not only a very reliant system, but it's a system that the guys are constantly working on things that are way beyond electrical. Like in the winter, you'll see them out trimming a lot of trees. And that's why we don't have a lot of power outages, because they work really hard to keep branches and tree limbs off of the main power lines, so that when we have storms, a lot of the neighborhoods won't be losing power with having a major branch or a limb come down. The next thing I wanted to mention is neighborhoods. About 85% of our community and our tax base is residential, and it's also becoming much more diverse. In the last 10 years census, we have gone from, in 2000, a minority population or non-white population in our community at 10%. The 2010 census had our non-white population at 20%, and that is continuing to grow over the last 6 years. So I think what it means is there's a lot of work out there in our neighborhoods that we want to keep these neighborhoods safe, stable, and a great place to live. So some of the things we're working on is building and code inspections. We have put a lot of time and effort into building inspections, and now in recent years also into code inspections. And it can be as simple as what one of the projects our city staff is working on this year, to ask people to not store their trash barrels in front of the home. We have an ordinance on that. For years it was well followed, and in recent years we haven't done such a good job, so we're renewing our efforts on that. But it can also be something complicated as a rundown piece of property that's not being maintained, and the owner may not want to cooperate, and sometimes this even ends up in court. But our staff, I think, does a great job working on a variety of code compliances, and it takes a lot of time and effort that, again, we as citizens aren't always aware of. We've also, for our neighborhoods, have instituted an HRA program, a Housing and Redevelopment Authority programs that now provide grants. And we have grants in 3 areas that we've just started to implement this year. One is for home renovations, particularly something that involves, but doesn't have to completely involve, the exterior of your home. We also have emergency grants. A good example would be if someone has their sewer line collapses, they need an instant replacement of that sewer line. They don't have the money available. This might be a source of a grant on that, and I believe that's a no-interest loan. And we also have a program that we're just beginning now called Aging in Place, and the idea of that is to help senior citizens in our town have someone come in, do an assessment of what might be needed in your home as you age, whether it be railings or different types of steps or grab bars in the bathroom or whatever, and they'll come in and give an assessment of that and and put in a list of what needs to be done or what you would like to have done. You can pick and choose what you want, and the city will pick up $500 of that as a grant, so you don't have to repay that. So that's another program we're trying to encourage with our housing stock and keeping people who have lived in their neighborhoods for many years, keep them there as long as they'd like to live there. I think that's very important. Another area that I cannot say enough about how proud I am of this area, but is the area of community policing. We have instituted a program trying to get our police to know the residents. And we're working very hard, and we have a younger police force now that has come on over the last couple of years, and they're very engaged in this program. And they have started such programs of getting to know children, like a bike rodeo. They've held that a couple of years. Fishing with Cops, another program. We've hosted some events with the fire department and tied to the car show each of the last 2 years. They have people get a chance to meet some of these men and women that serve our city in uniform. We think that's very important, that people who get to know their police officers are also people that will communicate with the police officers if they see something suspicious. And the police department's also worked on the creation of Crime Watch programs, and we want to continue to expand that in our community as well. And I also want to mention our fire department as far as our neighborhoods. Our fire department has done a wondrous job for many, many years. Now, interesting statistic, over 80% of the fire department calls are not for fires. They're usually medical emergency calls. And so as a result, the department's transitioning somewhat. And we also have, I don't know if it's a sign of the times or whatever, but like many fire departments throughout the country, there's not as much interest in people volunteering to join the fire departments in the communities. So our numbers are down as well. So the fire department and the city council and city staff are working very hard to come up with some ideas for the future that will allow us to maintain our own volunteer fire department, but figure out a way also that we have enough firefighters available to serve and be on call when a call comes in to help our residents in their moment of need. I also wanted to mention our neighborhoods. We have a rental property inspection program. We have a number of single-family homes that have now rental, plus we have duplexes, fourplexes, and larger units. And every time a unit is rented, it goes through an inspection. And it's proven good results because, the life and safety features are in there. If it's a single family home, some of the maybe maintenance work that maybe has been neglected will be kind of spruced up and taken care of. So it's helped really offer more stability in our neighborhood as well. And lastly, I just wanted to mention, tied to our Aging in Place program, the city's going to begin starting a Safe Haven program, which will provide, through the guidance of our fire department, both carbon monoxide detectors and fire alarms for the homes. And that particularly will focus on seniors and help place a number of those at no cost to the homeowners to make sure that they have operating units for the safety of the people living in that home. So those are the types of things that we're working on kind of behind the scenes in our neighborhoods. Another area that I wanted to mention that has a lot of activity going on behind the scenes is our city planning and community development. We will be instituting, and I think at the next council meeting, we'll be asked to approve a program called a wayfinding program, which is simply that, helping people find their way around town. And it isn't necessarily for longtime residents, but it's for people who come into town for various purposes. And with the highway construction and the setup of our access to the town, we think that's vitally important right now, that people will be able to find their way around the community, and you'll see a series of new types of signs going up. The council has yet to determine on the priority, but it probably will be about a 4-year program of the types of signs and where they'll be placed. But just to give you one idea, we have gotten at least a preliminary approval from MnDOT to put a North St. Paul logo sign on the Margaret Street Bridge railings. And the designs have been, I think, quite attractive, and we're really excited to have that as an example to help identify the town. We'll also be changing all the border signs where you come into North St. Paul, welcome to North St. Paul. Those signs will in the future now be consistent and can also carry, of course, the new city logo. So that's one area that set up a task force with businesses, members of our commissions, other interested citizens to work on that program, and they worked for about a year on it, and I think we have a good product coming as a result of that. We also are working on a new downtown design manual to help guide future growth in the downtown, and I will be mentioning downtown in greater detail in a few minutes here regarding some of our future challenges. But our downtown, we want to, as development occurs, we want to have at least some common themes. We want some of the public areas that will be consistent with how they look, with streetlights and sidewalks and all those types of things. So we had a visual preference survey that we did on that, and we continue to work on design ideas for the community. Another thing I wanted to mention that our planning staff has worked on is a home-based business ordinance. This has been an issue in some areas. Fortunately, it's not widespread, where people, well-intended, will start a business and work out of their home, but it might be the type of business that kind of disrupts the neighborhood with additional vehicles or storage in the yards. So we put into place a new ordinance where we're asking people who run those home-based businesses to file an application to work with our city staff to place conditions on what they are allowed to do with the home-based business and what they aren't. And just the idea of that is to be a good neighbor and to reduce some of the frustrations of people who might be living adjacent to these property owners. Also, I wanted to mention the work of our community development program to attract new business. Although it's a real battle to attract new businesses, being between the Maplewood Mall area and the city of Woodbury, we continue to work hard on trying to attract new businesses. We recently worked with a national company to reach out to a number of corporate chains that run operations, fast food restaurants, et cetera, to get them to look at North St. Paul. And we also need to look at smaller-based businesses, because our downtown is probably better focused for family-based, small-town types of businesses that we had in the past. And we need to continue to work on that, and our staff works diligently on that every day, every week, trying to bring in new business. And it is a tough challenge. We also wanted to mention we have a facade program that we've been working on for several years. It's a business person can get a loan up to $15,000 to improve their facade. The city covers 20% of that, and if that program is done and you complete the program, the city's 20%, or up to $3,000, is forgiven for the business. So we have had a couple businesses take advantage of that. We'd certainly like more to consider it as well, to continue to improve the downtown appearance for ourselves and for people who come to visit our town. And then also the community development staff works a lot with our city HRA, our Housing Redevelopment Authority, and our Economic Development Authority on a lot of different things that come up in the discussions of those commissions. And that can vary from day to day and meeting to meeting, but they work very hard on trying to meet some of the needs, again, in the areas of housing. What types of housing do we need? How can we attract a housing developer? Where would the housing developer want to go? What would be some of the features we can convince them that this is a desirable place to build a structure? So they work very hard on that with our HRA and EDA as well. And the last area, kind of behind the scenes, I wanted to mention is finance. We have a great finance department. They've won Government Finance Association awards for too many years that we don't have room on the wall for the plaques anymore almost. And they do a great job, but they do so many things behind the scenes, all the billings and accounts payable and helping people with billing problems and all those types of things. They also do a lot of work with managing our city's investments. And we do have a city committee that works on the investments, which I happen to be a member as mayor. And I tell you, I'm just so impressed with how much that money is managed. Like this year we got, for the street construction and the lift stations and the new park building, we sold about $7 million in bonds. Well, that money is invested for short term. And we have to be cautious with our cash flow and be able to pay our bills, et cetera. So they do a great job on that as well. And they do a great job, I think, in terms of managing our budget as well. We have a budget that we need to keep tabs on. We obviously, just like anybody, from month to month, we need to know if we're spending too much or not spending enough, which is never a problem. And it's always an area that our finance department works hard and keeps the city manager and our city staff well informed on. So those are the types of, and the last thing the finance does, as I looked down at my notes, is the audits. We do an annual audit, obviously, for the integrity of the city, the integrity of our taxpayers, the integrity of our residents, to make sure that the money is all accounted for and the money is spent wisely. Those audits are always kept on file, and I think they're available on our city website as well. And I encourage people to take a look at them. They're a little bit thick, but if you have a chance, there's 3 components. The management plan is a real good thing to look at because it's kind of a summation of everything, and it gives you a really good handle on how the audit is completed and where the city's funds are spent and the different types of things. And we've been fairly free with audits. We've never been given a bad audit that in the years that I'm aware of, and that goes back 26 years, and I'm proud of that fact. Our staff does a great job with that. So one of the things I want to go back to real quick is just mention our police reserves. I forgot to mention them. We have a police reserve staff of about 16 officers. They last year donated, and I emphasize that, over 7,500 hours of time in helping to support our police department. They work the car show, they transport prisoners down to the county jail, they patrol when people are on vacation. We have a vacation list you can get on, and they'll patrol that. They'll go by the schools and all the city buildings and patrol the town, and mostly on the weekends, but various times. And again, their contribution to the city and to our police department is immeasurable, and I want to also give my shout out to them as well for the job they do in supporting the community that goes pretty much unnoticed. So let's turn to the challenges and talk about them. The first one I wanted to talk about is infrastructure. Huge challenge because it has a huge price. We've done 2 road construction projects in 14 and 16 that cost nearly, let's see, I got to do my math, about $9+ million. Largely because, as I mentioned, everything has to be replaced. We're working very hard as a city to figure out how we do those priorities, yet also maintain our streets that are in good condition, and those that can do what are called mill and overlays, grinding down the top 2 inches and resurfacing them at obviously a much cheaper cost. So that is one of, I think, our critical challenges that we have. I mentioned the cost of painting a water tower, the cost of the lift stations. These things never end, and the reality is that our city has a limited tax base, and we have a limited amount of taxes that we can generate from all of you good folks through the property taxes. So we work very diligently in trying to challenge ourselves all the time how we can do what we need to do and how we can plan for the things we need to do in the future. And it's, I think the council members, and I want to recognize both Councilmember Sonic and Councilmember Peterson who are here this evening for their diligent work on it. And I think a lot of nights we go home with some big headaches because it's a real challenge for everyone in the city. But it's a challenge that we're willing to continue to do for the residents, because we can't go without the infrastructure that we have in our city. And that leads to the next challenge I think that's out there, which is economic development. We have, because we're small and we have limited open land available for development, redevelopment is the key to our future. Just as an example, the Anchor Block site off of McKnight in 36. There are some proposals, though there's nothing that's definitely has happened, but some discussions of some business interest for development in there. And our economic development plan for that area calls for commercial development north of the Gateway Trail and housing south of the Gateway Trail, high-density housing, apartments, condos, townhomes, etc. And I estimate at least that if we can get that to happen, all of that, that will grow our city's tax base by about $70 to $75 million. And right now, last year, if you add up all the property in our city, the value of all of our homes and all the businesses and all the apartment buildings, it comes out to about $750 million. So this could grow just that development could grow our tax base by about 10%. And so to me, economic development is just crucial to help us meet our infrastructure needs and our operating needs in the many years to come. I also wanted to mention the housing mix that we are looking at for the future. We have very little open land left, so we are looking at, as I mentioned, the student housing program. We're looking at lots of homes where homes might be dilapidated, or open lots that might be splittable, to add some new houses to provide a real stability, because homes, especially new homes in older neighborhoods, really has an impact, as we've seen with some of the student housing. Other neighbors go ahead and do their fixing up because they see that new home that has come into their neighborhood, and they take additional pride as well. So we're looking at that, but we're also looking at the higher density housing and where that can be. And as I mentioned, the area by the Anchor Block site, we're also looking at high density housing up in the area, which we now call Commerce Park, up where the school bus garage used to be, up near Anchor Bank. And that would be another area that potentially is available, and we have had some interest in some housing developments. Again, market rate apartments mostly in that area. We have that interest in that. And again, that's a huge advantage for our city to get that, because it grows our tax base immensely when those larger projects happen. So, and we're also trying to assess what we call housing mix, because a lot of us, like me, and lived in this town my whole life, and we want to stay here. And it's different when our children grow up, they get out on their own. They need a different type of housing than people who are raising a family and have 4 or 5 kids. And that's different than empty nesters when the kids go off on their own and get married and go off to college. And that's different for probably a couple different phases of seniors as we retire and as we grow elderly, of what types of housing needs there can be. And we've done a fairly good job right now in our senior. That's one area where we can see, I think, some good results with. But we also have the needs with maybe loft apartments that kind of have unique floor plans that young people find attractive, et cetera. So I think that housing challenge is always going to be there as well. And we also have not only the economic development, but the downtown itself is very unique in our town. I mentioned Commerce Park, I mentioned Anchor Block. Well, the third area prime for development is the downtown. And I think it's critical that we preserve our downtown, but we also need to make improvements. My feeling, at least personally, is that doing nothing's not an option. We need to continue to improve the downtown. The downtown renovations that were done last was done in about 1970, and they're starting to show their age. They're starting to show the need to be redone. And so we're starting to work on what to do with the downtown, whether it becomes a total redevelopment, whether it becomes something that's just a kind of a shorter term fix that might last us 20 years. Again, community surveys have shown people are really supportive of wanting to come downtown, spending time there. We know it's not a retail center anymore. We know it's more of an activity center. You can come down, there is some retail. Obviously, we'd love to have a few more eat places than we don't have. We die for a coffee shop. But those are things that we believe will happen. But we see from our residents a real desire to connect with the downtown still. And we're also looking at gathering places and places we could maybe hold concerts, et cetera. So the downtown is a unique character. We do have some parcels the city owns, the old medical site, the old city hall site, that are ready and waiting and primed for development. And we continue to try to seek out interested parties to move forward with that. The last thing I wanted to mention, which I think is the most difficult of all, is the financing and the taxes. As I mentioned, all these things cost money. We can't do them all at once, but I think the council believes, and I think our residents believe, that we have to continue to move forward. We can't go backward and have those fond memories of the old days in town, those of us who have lived here a long time. But we have to make it a decent and nice place, which I think it is, but we need to continue to grow further and continue to keep it that way. And I think we have a lot of things going for us, our location, our housing diversity. We have a lot of mixture of styles of homes and different price ranges. So I think that that's a challenge that, again, that how we're going to pay for our infrastructure needs, how we're going to continue to meet the demands of what our residents want in terms of park facilities, and in terms of policing needs, et cetera. We just need to continue to be, as a group, as a community, working together to try to build a town that will continue and sustain itself for way beyond our lifetimes and continue to be a decent place. So with that, my fellow citizens, I just want to conclude, and I have my little written out conclusion here. Our community has many challenges that lie ahead. We are all residents. We are all city council residents and city staff we'll face these together to make our community better for ourselves and our children. I know our staff will work hard every day, offering their experience and ingenuity and creativity to help our city move forward. I know their energy and knowledge of our city will help us as a city council make the tough decisions. And I also want to point out to the council, I think our council working with the staff, our council, all of us have deep roots in the community. I think we all have the desire as well to work through the problems we face and the challenges we face and continue to make our town a great place to be. And I also know that our citizens, many of whom have deep roots and some of who entered our community recently, will continue to be supportive of having the town of North St. Paul be a great place to live that they are proud of. Let's work together to face these many challenges ahead, and let's keep moving. Now is the time. So with that, thank you all for coming this evening, and God bless all of you, and God bless our great city. Thank you.